We're now being joined by John Blaxland, who is a professor in intelligence studies and international security at the Australian National Security University. John, welcome to WION World is One. Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu continues to insist that this is just the beginning. This is a war between Israel and Hamas, but Gazans are the ones who are suffering more. We have seen that Israel has cut fuel, food and electricity to Gaza. Gazans, again, continue to suffer because this is what the world is seeing as Palestinians are at war with Israel. But the international community is not talking about that. Why?
Yeah, no, thank you for having me on the program, Ari. The challenge here is that this, for Israel, is an existential challenge, the likes of which they have not seen in half a century. And Israeli shock is profound. There is a grave fear in Israel about the very prospect of actually the nation surviving with Hamas's attacks, the prospect of Iranian-supported Hezbollah attacks from the north. This is something that they have been working assiduously to avoid by working on the Abraham Accords, looking to do a deal with Saudi Arabia, and hopefully by engaging these other countries and by making some placatory moves in the past towards Gazans, the people, the Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank, come up with a modus vivendi, a sort of a way of letting things be the way they are.
Right.
Particularly in the 20 years or so since the failed Oslo Accords, Israel has been kind of struggling to make an arrangement that's workable while facing implacable opposition from Hamas in Gaza. Mm-hmm. And the attacks of the last week have, I think, driven Israel to a state of concern and determination that is leading them to take this really very drastic step. My concern is that this is actually exactly what Hamas wanted them to do, right, to react in such an extreme way that it would generate enormous global backlash, particularly in the Middle East and elsewhere, and it would undermine Israel's broader, deeper, long-term security.
John, the world is now seeking peace, and we've seen that Antony Blinken is on a shuttle diplomacy. What do you think of Antony Blinken's shuttle diplomacy? Will it work eventually?
So it's interesting, Anthony Blinken is reflecting on the shuttle diplomacy of Henry Kissinger half a century ago, who was involved in this very same kind of act. So the United States remains, it appears, the indispensable power in negotiating between rival factions and in looking to strike some kind of deal that would save face, perhaps, while placating the various factions, the various sides in this equation, mindful that there are disputes not just here between Israel and Hamas, but between Saudi Arabia and Iran, between the United States and Saudi Arabia in the past to a certain extent. Turkey has a stake in this as well. They have been supporters of Hamas recently. They were erstwhile supporters of Israel. There is considerable unease in various parts of the world about the approach that Israel has taken, but at the political elite level, there's been an acceptance of Israel, and it appears that Hamas's actions are about undermining that acceptance of Israel at the political elite level simply by generating the reaction, the visceral reaction in the street in various countries around the Middle East and beyond, making it very difficult for Israel and making it very difficult for the United States as well. And that's the context in which we're seeing the reaction from Biden in the last 24 hours to saying, Israel has to operate within boundaries. They have to be looking to the human rights and the humanitarian concerns of the people in Gaza. This is not the rhetoric of a couple of days ago. It's the rhetoric that reflects the severity of Israeli actions in Gaza in the past few days. And this is exactly the kind of predicament which Hamas, in my estimation, has been banking on. to make life impossibly difficult for Israel.
All right, finally, John, and I want your brief response to this one. Can the world really afford two wars? We have the Ukraine-Russia conflict still going on. We now have the Israel-Hamas conflict now in its official stage or offset stages. Has the international community failed to assert itself and push for peaceful resolutions, you think?
Yes, the international community is facing a very difficult challenge. The United Nations is at gridlock, and that's in part because of the way the former Soviet Union, the Russians and China have been basically aligning themselves with Iran. Iran has aligned itself with Hamas. Israel is aligned with the United States and to a large extent the West. There's a prospect of this actually considerably worsening and the situation unraveling. So we can only hope and pray that people like Anthony Blinken, their work is effective, that they do actually point out the risks of this actually deteriorating further. People don't realise that when you take away the floor, you don't know how far you can fall, and we could be heading into an abyss. We hope that the sanity will prevail and that the checks and balances of power will persuade the Hezbollah, Iran, and others that this far and no further, and that from this point they should back away, and likewise for Israel, that they have inflicted the damage that they need, and that they need to therefore find a way of living with the new normal, with constrained Gaza into the future.
Professor in Intelligence Studies and International Security at Australian National Security University, Professor John Blaxland, thank you for talking to WION World is One today.
Thank you for having me on the program, Harry.